even though we can all try to live longer and do all of the right things to live longer, there is going to be a point in all of our lives that we will spend in some type of disability. That's just a reality. And I think what longevity medicine does is try to ignore that fact. And what I really want to encourage is that we accept that as normal and we actually build healthcare, we build communities to support the challenges that will inevitably happen to all of us as we age.
Welcome to I Did My Own Research. I'm Dr. Fran, and today I'm joined by Dr. Stephanie Rogers, also known as Age Well with Dr. Steph. Dr. Rogers went to medical school at Tulane and did her internal medicine and geriatrics fellowship at UCSF. She now works as the Associate Chief of Geriatrics Clinical Programs at UCSF and is the founder and medical director of UCSF's Age-Friendly Health System. Online, she teaches older adults, their caregivers, and other medical professionals about evidence-based geriatrics principles. Dr. Rogers, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
You work in such an interesting part of medicine that I think a lot of us in our medical training weren't exposed to. And a lot of what you teach online is actually directed a lot of times I feel at other medical professionals. How did you get into content creation? Was there something that inspired you to start all this? Did you have a patient experience that taught you, like, I really need to be online teaching people? Like, tell me how you got here.
Yeah, I actually started an account for a totally different reason because I built an online course to teach people, especially other female doctors, how to be productive and efficient in their work. But I started adding in a little bit of medical content when I was doing that, and I realized that people really, really wanted that. And very quickly, I got a lot of older followers. There's a lot of older adults online, and they had a lot of questions, and I realized very quickly that there was a strong need for this, both with the medical professionals, but also with older adults and a lot of people who are in midlife and are caring for their parents as well.
That's so interesting. For those of you who don't have social media, our social media accounts can tell us our demographics. Mine as an OB/GYN are obviously mostly women. I'm like 97% female. And my audience tends to be a little bit younger, 20s and 30s. I imagine for you, like you said, it's more maybe 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. Does that sound right?
Yeah, all the way up to 90s, actually.
Wow. I love that we have some 90-year-olds on social media. That's amazing. When you think about, so tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day job looks like. You are a geriatrician, you work in internal medicine. So tell us just a little bit of background in your real life job, what your job is and what you do for patients.
Sure. So clinically, I work as an inpatient geriatrician. And so we do consults for other admitting teams for patients that are older and are dealing with different geriatric syndromes. We also co-manage the orthopedics service. And so we have a lot of patients getting different surgeries, and we do both the internal medicine co-management as well as the geriatrics co-management. And so what we do is a comprehensive geriatric assessment, looking at their cognition, their function, safe medications, what matters to them, their goals, and we sort of put that together for the team. And it's great because they're all very busy with the disease-specific stuff, and we can spend the time really getting to know the patient and the family and their situation.
We obviously in medical school learn a lot about like polypharmacy and how many of our patients are on too many medications. And you've recently started a series on your own social media talking about the medications that we should be more careful with, especially later on in life. What are some of those medications that you are seeing in your clinical practice that really we should be avoiding for our patients as much as possible?
There was a large marketing effort early in the 2000s by the company that makes gabapentin that sort of gave us all as clinicians the idea that this is not only effective but safe for postoperative pain. And this was before any studies were actually published on the subject. And they were fined for that unethical marketing practice. But because of the opioid epidemic and all of us rightly wanting to find something safer to use than opioids, it really became embedded in practice, so much so that even where I work, it's on all the postoperative order sets. And in the last few years, people have actually started doing these studies, and it's come out that actually they don't reduce postoperative pain in any clinically meaningful way. There are a few studies that show it's statistically significant, but not clinically meaningful. And they don't actually reduce opioid use either. And the scariest thing is that when you combine gabapentin with opioids, which is what a lot of post-operative patients are getting, you actually increase their risk of opioid overdose by 49%. because gabapentin is a respiratory depressant. If you're combining that with opioids, you're actually increasing their risk. So people have more falls, they have more aspiration pneumonias because they're a little bit sleepy, and more delirium, etc. And so I think we sort of have to walk this back in the medical field. We wanted to do something good. We wanted to reduce the amount of opioids for patients, but unfortunately that was sort of rolled out without the evidence. And now that the evidence is coming out, I think we need to roll it back. And I'm not saying it's not for everyone, but I think these blanket target, post-operative order sets, I think we need to rethink those.
I think it's interesting when it comes to social media because initially you kind of think that you're talking to patients. But I have found that actually there's a lot of healthcare professionals who follow each other to learn from other people. And I think medicine is lifelong learning, but sometimes you get a little stuck in your own ways. You kind of go to the same conferences, you read the same journals. You may like just one topic within the field that you study, so you don't hear as much. And I feel that social media is one way to get exposed to a lot of other experts, topic of conversation, people who are really diving deep into the research and sharing what they're finding. And so I think it's really important that people in all aspects of medicine are talking about what they're learning about, right? Because I, as a surgeon, do give a lot of gabapentin. And I don't think I would have seen those studies if I wasn't following you and having someone else talk about what they're seeing in other fields of medicine rather than what I'm most often reading about and learning about. Do you find that you have a lot of healthcare professionals who follow you and comment on those kind of topics?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, especially as a geriatrician, there's not many of us in the country. And so I think we have this very specialized knowledge, and not every hospital or health system has access to a geriatrician. And so I feel lucky that I can have those conversations online. And I've actually had really good conversations with other people, other surgeons who say, well, actually, in my type of surgery, there's these 3 studies that were done. And so we sort of talk about them together and learn together. Because again, I think this is what's hard about being a doctor on social media, is that people want black and white, but as you know, medicine is very gray, and we have to sort of sit in those nuances. And I've been personally really struggling with that, because it's hard in 60 seconds to give people a nuanced answer that they can take something concretely from and adapt in their life. And so I think behind the scenes, us doctors are having those nuanced conversations, and we're trying to learn how to convey that to regular patients and people.
Yeah. How do you find that balance of the nuance in medicine that we know in our clinical world, in our training? We know all about nuance, but how do you translate that to the internet, to not only other healthcare professionals, but caregivers, patients, people in their 90s? How do you find that your audience reacts to what you're making, and how do you make it palatable to them?
I'm not sure that I've got it perfect. I'm sort of letting it go as much as I can, because I can only do so much. I can't make my video for every individual situation. And so I try to mention those caveats where they exist, but I also just have to be okay with, I'm not gonna hit everybody's individual situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I assume since you are creating online, you also spend time consuming social media and learning from other people. Is there anything that you have changed your viewpoint on, something that you've adapted into your own practice that you may not have been taught in our traditional training as physicians?
Well, I would say obviously all of the new menopause stuff that's been coming out has been amazing, because I was in medical school during a time where that was still something that, was possibly dangerous for women to do. And so, we actually have to go out of our way to sort of find the updates, especially around women's health. And I have found that whole subject very useful also, as I am perimenopausal and moving into that stage. And I get to have the opportunity to sort of listen to different doctors online and look things up myself, and then have these conversations with my colleagues and my women friends as well. So in particular, that topic, I think, has been a really amazing demonstration of the power of social media and the good that can actually come out of it.
I absolutely agree with you. I was taught very little about menopause management in my OBGYN residency. And that, long story short of why that got to that point, but I too learned a lot from the leaders in menopause discussions online, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, Dr. Heather Hirsch. I just passively would watch their videos, and I recognized so much of what they were talking about when they were saying that we weren't taught it correctly. And there are so many reasons for that, even as in residency, why that is. And their encouragement, their discussions online really furthered my own interests in the topic, made me understand how I would be disadvantaging my own patients if I didn't learn about this, and have answered a lot for me when I did start practicing it clinically. I now do a lot of hormone replacement therapy in my practice. I really feel I have a good sense of where the studies are because other doctors are online advocating for not only the medicine itself, but for that other healthcare professionals are learning how to do it. So I think that's like one way. And I see that in my field, my like personal platform, I talk a lot about PCOS. And it's just me trying to get what I know out to other healthcare professionals. Of course, I want patients to get better care, but it's really, I want clinicians to be better at recognizing and knowing how to help their patients in like a very multifaceted, patient-centered approach in a ways that we weren't taught in medical school or our own training.
Yeah, I completely agree. In fact, it's increased my confidence in talking about those subjects. Like, I feel like now I've sort of worked through all the different caveats with watching all these videos online of other doctors. And now when a patient asks me about it, I feel very confident in what I'm saying, which is very different than 3 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's just one benefit of doctors and other clinicians being on social media. It's not just for patients, it's for each other too. Obviously, the world of geriatrics is impacted by the world of like biohacking and longevity medicine and those kind of things. Do you find that there's a lot of misinformation in that world online?
I think there's a lot of misinformation online about that world, that field of, well, we can talk about what longevity medicine means, but the way that the general community talks about it is very new, very new. And so even things that maybe have a little evidence behind them are not that strong yet. And I think what's sort of interesting about that word longevity medicine, in medicine, that is medicine. Like, we already know the strongest factors that help you live long. Don't smoke, limit your drinking, exercise, eat well, maintain a normal body weight, have a strong social circle, sleep 8 hours a night. Those are the biggest factors that are going to have the greatest impact on not only how long you live, but the quality of life that you'll live. And I rarely see anybody that has all those dialed in. And sort of the way that I think about this is, if you really are interested in longevity medicine for yourself, you should have all those factors very dialed in until you get to all these other little things, which are honestly just drop in the bucket longevity things. And so I think the other concept that sort of bothers me about longevity medicine is, even though we can all try to live longer and do all of the right things to live longer, there is going to be a point in all of our lives, if we are lucky to live long enough, that we will spend in some type of disability, whether that's vision, hearing, physical, cognitive. That's just a reality. And I think what longevity medicine does is try to ignore that fact. And what I really want to encourage is that we accept that as normal, and we actually build healthcare, we build communities, we build our support systems to support the challenges that will inevitably happen to all of us as we age. That is never going to go away, especially if people start living to 110, 120. There's going to be a period of time that you are living with some sort of disability. And so I feel like the longevity community is sort of ignoring that fact. And I think we should meet everybody and their needs wherever they are, no matter how they age. We all age very differently. And I don't like that we're sort of ignoring that truth.
Now, do you think we're really going to live to 120? I had not seen that be a topic of conversation before.
I
Are we
don't-
really thinking
I
that's going
don't
to
think
happen?
we're close to that.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
I don't think in my lifetime I'll see that. But
Is that the goal of biohacking, to get to 120?
some of these longevity experts luckily are switching. It's not about the number of years you live, but the quality of life of years that
Is
you
this
live.
this like health span versus lifespan
Yes.
conversation?
Yes. And I think that is an important distinction. It really is health span that we want to be focusing on. I mean, that's really what we all want for ourselves and our family members, is to have the best days that we can have for how many days we have in life.
Why do you think online, though, people are so drawn to this concept of biohacking, longevity medicine. When I think about it, I think, it seems almost easier than all of those things that you mentioned. It's hard to reduce your stress on a day to day basis. It is hard to eat your vegetables, to get the right amount of fiber every day, to get 8 hours of sleep. Those things are hard. It almost seems like the concept of like biohacking, and if you just inject some NAD, it's going to like replace the fact that you're actually only getting 6 hours of sleep and that you had pizza 3 times this week for dinner. Is that like kind of how people are feeling about that?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, because I think the most common question I get online is what supplements and what peptides should I take?
Yeah, and should we take any of those? Tell me, peptides I feel like are very new in the social media space, and I keep seeing little like rumblings about it. What are peptides, and should we be on them?
I
Probably
don't even
not.
understand them myself because it's
Okay.
interesting because I think what people are calling peptides, we already have peptides in medicine. We have different medications that are already peptides. So
Right.
I personally don't even understand these newer peptides that are coming out. And as far as supplements, too, that's such a big term, but I would say there are very small use cases where supplements can be helpful. Like you need to have very particular things or deficiencies in order for a supplement to actually work. And so I'm always telling people like I don't actually recommend any of those things because they don't have a lot of research behind them. Someone's probably trying to sell you something. That's what's actually going on. And again, focus on those big impact items. You know, if you really want to live a long time, exercise and eat vegetables and then once you have that dialed in, let's talk.
I think for supplements, it's also like, what are you treating or preventing? Again, in the world of PCOS, there are some evidence based supplements depending on what your goals are. But I would not say you should take all of them because you don't have all of those problems and you don't have all of those goals. And so I think maybe like if someone has diabetes, are there additional supplements you can help that go alongside medicine? But just generic kind of like you should take the supplement for like longevity. One, what does that mean? And two, what is the evidence behind that? I agree that a lot of times online, if someone has 14 links in bio for the different longevity supplements, that's not the goal. There are ways that you can take supplements that make sense in addition to modern medicine, but it has to be for a specific diagnosis with a specific goal in mind, not just like generalized whatever. I'm going to live to 120 because like there's no data to support that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a very specific situation that you use certain supplements and yeah, I think you just got to get people to know what are you looking for and then we can say if there are supplements. But even then, you know, I think the impact of those is, you know, a drop in the bucket sometimes when we're talking about overall behavioral changes, et cetera.
Yeah. Do you find that there are some people who are having those conversations? And the listeners of this podcast are probably going to hear me talk about this every single time. But modern medicine is boring, and talking about modern medicine can be very boring. But do you see that people are there out there still having the conversations about those like boring topics of lifestyle medicine? You know, the pillars of sleeping, eating, social connection. Are there people who are doing a good job of balancing that conversation of real life things that you can be doing while still pursuing that prolonged health span?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people are doing it really well. I mean, that's where we have to get creative as creators. Like, how are we going to hold attention and make this exciting? And I do review certain supplements, but I think there are other interesting topics that, for instance, the Instagram account, the Brain Docs, I really like them. They put things in a very concise, practical way. You know, I think one of the most preventative things that you can do to prevent dementia is to get your hearing tested and to wear hearing aids if you need it. That is the number one most preventive. And a lot of people just don't know that, right? And so I did a video recently about, you know, when you're 50, 55, you should probably get screened once and then every couple years. And if you correct that hearing loss, you can actually prevent cognitive decline. And so I think there's a lot of very simple, practical things that are getting lost in this fancy, sexy peptide supplement world. And yeah, I mean, I think there is a lot of ableism where there is a stigma to wearing hearing aids, unfortunately, and they're getting smaller and cooler. There's like AI ones now. So like, you know, I'm part of what I want to do as I build my social media world is to destigmatize those things and to sort of normalize them. Again, all of us are going to age. All of us are going to live a part of our life in some sort of disability. So let's make normal all of that and make it easy for people to do the right thing.
Yeah. What other things should we be doing? I am 38, so some people tell me this is midlife. I think they're lying. I am merely a high school graduate at this point in my life. But what are some things we should be doing in our late 30s, going into our 40s that are going to help us age well?
Putting on muscle and making sure that you have good muscle mass starting in your 30s and 40s, because inevitably, even if you're working out, it will decline a little bit. The good news is you can actually put on muscle at any age. They've done studies of people in their 80s and 90s and lifting weight, and they can improve. And so that is possible. You can start at any age, but if you start now and you start with a good base, a good reserve, you're setting yourself up for a long life. I think function and independence is one of the biggest predictors of prognosis. How you're able to move around the world tells me as a geriatrician a lot. I mean, when you see a frail patient, right? You're like, ooh, that person is not doing well. And you think, they may not live very much longer. And so to combat that frailty, the biggest thing that you can do is put on muscle. And then the other thing that I think will have the biggest impact on aging well is having a strong social circle. This is one, loneliness is one of the biggest predictors of early mortality. And so building those friends now, building those relationships now, and having meaningful relationships, it seems sort of crazy that something that simple can have such a big effect. But we know that if you are dealing with loneliness, you have a lot of increased risk of heart attacks, strokes, depression, early mortality, even dementia. And so I think that the two practical things that you can do are build muscle and have a strong social circle.
Have those friends and go build muscle together.
That's right. Work out together.
When you think about, I feel like the misinformation that we see online with longevity medicine, biohacking, all that, do you find that that translates into real life though? Do you see patients, your 90-year-olds coming to you and saying, hey, I saw on TikTok that I need this injection? Or do you find that your age bracket is a little bit more protected and less vulnerable?
I feel like maybe that age bracket's a little more protective. They're probably not spending as much time online as 30 and 40-year-olds. And I think that what they're struggling with is it's easy to think about the things when you're healthy and you don't have a lot of chronic disease and you're moving around the world, your function is good and your cognition is good, etc. But as you get older and more frail, your immediate needs are very, very different. And I think older people realize an infusion of NAD is just not going to cut it right now, right? So they're focused on more practical things like, how do I make it to my bingo game today without getting dizzy? Like this is why I love working with older adults, because they know exactly what they want. It's much more fun to meet their goals.
They also probably have had a lifelong of really being able to verbalize those goals and not give in to what other people want from them, even though I'm sure they have their own children who are pushing things one way or another with them. Do you ever have like caregivers come to you and say, I saw this online. Does this apply to mom? I saw that we should be buying this vibration plate. Like, are your patient or the caregivers coming to you and asking you those things?
People really worry about their parents, because I think when things start going wrong, it falls back onto the children. And so they're looking ahead and they're trying to prevent challenges from happening. And so they're asking about these things as well. But what I find actually is, in most cases, people start asking these questions when it's a little too late. Like mom has already fallen and broke her hip, or we're noticing that something's going on with dad's memory. And that's when people are sort of jumping in, and not to say there's nothing we can do at those stages, but aging is the type of thing that I'm realizing that you don't really worry about until it's happening to you. You're just like, that is so far off and I'm never going to be that. And it's hard for us to put ourselves in that situation. And it's hard for us to put our parents in that situation. And so I always find that the needs are immediate because people are sort of ignoring the truth until they get there.
I am not going to obviously give details, but I do see that in my own extended family, that you kind of just ignore it until one day you can't ignore it. And then all of a sudden there's like a big life change for everyone because everything changed. And, my husband's a primary care doc. So he tries to have these conversations with his patients about, not just like power of attorney and healthcare proxy, but DNR, DNI, who's going to take care of you. And a lot of his patients are like, I don't want to talk about this. And he's like, well, you're 87, so we should probably talk about it. And they're like, nah, I'm not concerned.
I mean, just a few weeks ago, I saw someone in the hospital and I sort of asked her name and what do you want to be called? And I say, I'm a geriatrician, and I explain what that is. And I say, how old are you? And this person was like, I'm 92. And they were like, I don't need to see you yet. And I just thought that was so interesting. Like, even a 92-year-old was surprised. I'm old enough for a geriatrician. So there is something about, I mean, it's sort of beautiful in a way. Like, we're all as young as we believe in our hearts. And actually, studies do show that the way that you perceive aging has a strong effect on how you age. So if you have really negative connotations about aging and you're angry about it and not looking for it and complaining about it, that actually shows that your well-being is not as good when you age. So I think it does help to have a very positive view of aging. There's a lot of great things that come with aging. You're more confident, you know your priorities and values more. This is why I also love working with older adults. Like, they don't give a shit. They just want to do what they want to do, like they are very clear, yes or no. And I love that about them. And that gives people a lot of confidence and a sense of well-being. I mean, we spend so much of our lives kind of doing things for other people, but I think older adults are more focused on like what they want and what's important to them. And so there are beautiful things about aging. And when we sort of focus on those positive aspects, the aging experience goes better for us.
Yeah. And I love that, again, like that you have brought this to a space where people are going to consume it who may not have otherwise, because now you are going to reach those 35-year-olds who are thinking about, how do I stay healthy for my young children? You're going to reach those 50-year-olds who are going into the next last 15 years of their career and need to set themselves up for a healthy lifespan after that. And you're reaching the people in their 70s who should be having those conversations with their children about what the plans are, what medications they should and should not be taking. I saw your video about statins recently, and I think that's probably one area of medicine where a lot of your patient population is affected by the misinformation online about statins and the health implications of not being on a statin. And so having you there in that space, in a conversation that maybe a lot of people either aren't thinking about or don't want to talk about, is so important.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think I like doing the high risk medication stuff because it is very concrete and people can sort of grab onto that. But it is also nice to sort of debunk some of the myths out there. But I am always interested because sometimes, even if I give them ample evidence and I say all of these things and it's not even sponsored by industry, and there's hundreds of studies that say this, there are still people that just don't believe it. And I'm kind of the mindset, I let people have their autonomy. My job as a doctor is to tell you what I know and you choose for yourself. It's I don't worry about it if you don't take my recommendations. But it is very interesting to sort of watch this happen, and the converse happens as well. Like, I had some people in that statin video be like, oh my gosh, I was actually thinking about stopping my statin and now I'm going to continue it because that risk of dementia is not true. So again, if you can affect one person, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. I think, for those of us who work clinically, we don't always have the time to spend 15 minutes with our patients talking about every single study when it comes to statins. But I know that many of our physician colleagues across the country are trying to have those conversations quickly with patients so they understand. But sometimes it takes seeing a video online with someone who was able to spend that time going through every study and giving them kind of the overall view of it in like a calm way inside their own home rather than in the doctor's office, that they see the benefit of what their own clinician told them. And I see that all the time online too when I talk about things like GBS testing, doing the glucola in pregnancy, taking aspirin. I have received probably hundreds of comments at this point from patients who are like, yeah, my doctor told me about that I should take an aspirin, but I didn't really understand it until I saw your video. And then I took my low dose aspirin in pregnancy. And I'm like, I'm sure your doctor did the very best that they could to explain this to you. But sometimes it's just as seeing someone on your TikTok talking about it to get you to really understand the importance of it. And that's why I love the topic of doctors on social media, because we're really trying to reach people where they're at. Sure, they're at their doctor's appointment, but where they're at a lot more is scrolling on Instagram, right? And so having us there is so important.
I agree. And I think the repetition helps because they hear these myths a lot online. And then if they hear it from their doctor and then they see a few more doctors on Instagram talk about it, then maybe they start to believe it, right? I mean, I think, let's face it, the loudest voices and the most common voices have the largest impact. And so I also think we need way more doctors online saying these sorts of things just so that patients can get their repetition of it.
Yeah, it's like a second and a third and a fourth opinion from your online doctor who's just telling you the same thing that your own doctor told you, right? In a way that makes sense to them while scrolling along on social media. All right, couple of rapid fire questions for you, okay? What medication is the most detrimental when it comes to not aging well?
Sleep medications in general. So things like the Z meds, Ambien, et cetera, benzodiazepines, and even things like Benadryl. We know from many studies that long-term use of these sleep medications can actually cause cognitive decline. Even if you stop those medications in the future, it doesn't like resolve. And so I think that's something, because a lot of things like even Benadryl is over the counter and people just take that thinking it's very healthy and they take it for years, but it has tremendous effects on your brain.
How do we feel about melatonin?
It's a great short-term drug. It's supposed to work for, a few nights. It's different than the other sleep medications because what it's trying to do is regulate your sleep wake cycle versus the other medications are sedating you. So different mechanisms of action, but that's why it doesn't really work that well in the long term. But honestly, I give it because people want something and the placebo effect is real.
Yeah. Okay, great. What is the best thing someone in their middle age can do to age well? We already addressed this a little bit, but what about a third tip?
So we're having good social circles and we're exercising a lot. I would say, I mean, I do think maintaining a normal body weight, and I'm not saying being thin, but maintaining a normal body weight is very important. We know that that helps lower your risk of many cancers, heart disease, cardiovascular disease, etc. And so whatever way that you can do that is going to be very helpful. And sort of the interesting thing about weight is, you want, I guess, as you're younger, 20s, 30s, 40s, it's a little bit better to be on the thinner side. I mean, not thin, but on the lower end of normal. And as you age and you get into your 60s and 70s and 80s, actually the people that are on the higher end of normal do better. So you want to actually have a little bit of weight on you as you age.
A little bit of cushion when we trip over our cat.
That's right. Not too much, but just a little bit can make a big difference.
What is one longevity hack that you believe in?
I am behind all of this muscle building and creatine for muscle building. The studies really show that the best effect, or how it works the best, is if you are actually doing strength training. So if you're not doing strength training, it's probably not doing very much for you. But if you are 2 to 3 times a week lifting weights for 20 to 30 minutes, it can have tremendous benefits for both, putting on your muscle mass, your energy levels, your cognitive health, etc.
I have seen a lot of that in the menopause space as well. That we're talking more about, how in conjunction with lifting weights, you can't just take some creatine and then be like, I am now mentally prepared for everything. But it's in conjunction with the thing that we already know is working. So I'm very interested to see what the studies come out. And what is the most underrated habit when it comes to aging well?
I do think the most underrated habit is the social circle and having strong emotional support. I think, especially post-COVID, we all needed to sort of get back out there and rebuild up our social skills. And I'm not sure we've really done that well at all. I know I haven't. And so I really do think there's not enough emphasis on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about like your day-to-day jobs now, we used to have in-person meetings all the time, and now everything is on Teams or Zoom. We're all in our own spaces listening to someone talk, and there's no interaction anymore. And that's probably just going to continue and get worse for those of us who do that work.
Yeah, we're going to really have to start going out of our way. I think we have to start proactively thinking about those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's a wonderful tip. Well, Dr. Rogers, thank you so much for being here. I've learned so much from you. I have loved following you and learning my own longevity, real real like health span tips. So I continue to be aging well. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who are not following you yet, where can everyone find you online?
I'm currently only on Instagram at Age Well with Dr. Steph, but I will be starting a TikTok and YouTube soon. So watch for that coming soon.
Excited to follow along. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course.